Hello, and welcome to this episode of ESG Talk, your go-to source for insights and advice from leaders in environment, social, and governance. I'm your host, Mandi and McReynolds, and today we're discussing the role of CFOs in ESG reporting, particularly around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Today, I'm joined by an incredible CFO, Maher Al-Haffar. He is the Chief Financial Officer of CEMEX, a global construction materials company. I had the privilege to meet him in Paris, as our two companies were part of the formative group of the CFO coalitions for the SDGs. Together, we were discussing how we can move sustainable finance together in the world forward for greater impact. Maher, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mandi. It's great to be here with you. Unfortunately, it's not in Paris, but it's just as nice to do it virtually. So that's fine.
Well, we're doing this show just in time because UN Day is coming up in October, and it is right before COP is kicking off, COP 28. So hopefully we'll be able to see one another soon. We know that this is a trend of sustainable finance, which is incorporating environment, social, governance factors into one of my favorite topics, capital allocation and investment decisions, which I know you are also passionate about. So tell us, why do you think sustainable finance is becoming more popular among borrowers and investors as you see it from your role of CFO?
Virtually everybody that I run into, and certainly other CFOs and CEOs that I talk to, believe that sustainability is just something that we cannot ignore. And in order to make things happen, frankly, we need to have everybody in the world aligning themselves, aligning the way they allocate capital, aligning the way that they manage their businesses to make sure that they're integrating, all elements of sustainability, but particularly those elements that deal with climate action. I can tell you at CEMEX, we're not newcomers to this. We've been in the business for, we've been champions of sustainability for more than 30 years. We were one of the first signatories to the UNGC. And, really not until 2020 that we launched our internal institutional, marquee program, which we call Future in Action, where we committed to the most, I would say, aggressive decarbonization and sustainability goals. And we felt very strongly about that for two reasons. Number one, because we thought it's the right thing to do in order to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions in the world. But also, we felt it's extremely important because it's also going to contribute to, frankly, the profitability of the business. I mean, in our business, most, if not all of the things that we're doing happen to be truly having double materiality impact. So it's helping us meet our sustainability goals and our decarbonization targets. But at the same time, those same achievements are actually improving our profitability. So for us, it's a must, plus it makes a lot of sense for our shareholders and different stakeholders. Now, why is it becoming so important for investors and issuers? Because I think most investors and most issuers are kind of becoming like-minded. They're coming to the same conclusions. We got to do something about it. A very important way of doing something about it is to make sure that there is sufficient amount of capital and attention and measurement and vigilance about this. And that's precisely what's happening. And we're very big champions of that. And we can talk about it in the rest of the conversation. But we have actually, after putting out our Future in Action program, we committed to our shareholders and our stakeholders that we would align our financing strategies to sustainability KPIs to the tune of 85% of our debt stack by 2030 and 50% of our debt stack by 2025. The sustainability linked financings around the world are just absolutely growing. And as we see ourselves heading towards the latter part of our roadmaps, meaning the 2030 to 2050 part of the roadmap, where all of us will need to make some degree of investment in carbon capture, there the financing requirements become even more important, and the opportunities, interestingly enough, become more interesting. And we're finding a lot of, let's say, unprecedented partnership. We're seeing other industries coming into the picture. We're seeing financial investors, both in the debt and the equity side. So it's becoming quite an interesting ecosystem that is developing in a very positive way. And we're very excited about that. And we're trying to catalyze that process as much as possible.
I appreciate the conversation and the leadership of CEMEX when you kind of work it through that line of profitability, then looking at debt financing, and then your sustainability goals. It's this very holistic plan. And what I appreciate that you talked about is the CFO Coalition really shares back and forth this best practices and what we're learning from one another. In our case at Workiva, what we're learning in technology and reporting in mid-sized companies. You're taking a leadership role when it comes to the construction and material industries, thinking a little bit more proactively and ahead. Now, I can imagine you sitting back 10 years ago as a practitioner in finance. Did you ever imagine that your world would be colliding and talking today about sustainable financing and debt financing being linked together? So tell us, how has this journey evolved for your role of the CFO, interlinking these environment, social, and governance goals?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you asked that question because I never would have thought that I would have had anything to do with this. From my perspective as a CFO, I mean, there are obviously many positive things. There are many risks that we manage, that has to do with sustainability. And here I would like to kind of step back and say it's not just about the E, not about just the environmental part. It's also the social part. It's the governance part. And really, from my perspective, I got very interested and passionate about it because it really has to do with, how do we make sure as stewards of capital on behalf of our shareholders and ultimately as stewards of capital for the community, right? And there's no better position than being part of a company like CEMEX that takes this extraordinarily seriously. It takes it extremely emotionally in a positive way. We have not only done things at the CEMEX level, but we've also, been part of coalitions, whether it's at the industry level or at a global level. The UNGC CFO Coalition, when I found out about it, I immediately, talked to the team. I said, "Oh my God, CEMEX has got to be part of this because we believe in all of these things. We want to share our experiences." And the UNGC has been really like a turntable, if you will. I think they've been quarterbacking this whole process, which is amazing. I think we're now at 70 or 71 founding CFOs. We're looking at growing the coalition significantly. I think we've come a long way. I have to tell you that our initial conversations when I first started learning about the UNGC CFO coalition, I started hearing all of these gigantic numbers in terms of the goals, and I thought, oh my God, this is just like, I don't want to say pie in the sky, but it was very aspirational. We were talking about aligning close to $500 billion in corporate SDG investments by 2025. We're talking about aligning more than 50% of total corporate investments with the SDGs. We're talking about having 80% linked to SDG finance or targets. These are all very, very ambitious targets. And yet, here we are a few years down the line, it's happening. It's actually happening. And even in our business, I mean, I think, if I were to take a look at 3-4 years ago, there was this consensus that coping with greenhouse gases and climate challenges is actually going to be detrimental to the business and it's going to be costly. And today we're getting calls from really totally surprising potential industrial partners that are talking to us about how could we work together on carbon capture and sequestration and usage and how can we turn it into useful things in this world as opposed to negative things. So there's a whole ecosystem momentum out there that is taking place, and it's very exciting to be part of that. And I think the UNGC, like I said, are doing a fantastic job being the quarterback to this whole process. And I'm super proud to be part of that initiative.
Well, what a journey for the role of CFO, from personal ambition to corporate ambition to then partnerships that can create a huge change and revolution and impact, both for the finance of a company as well as the impact of the globe. Let's pivot a little bit more towards that macro level of impact to an organization. How are you seeing the emerging ESG reporting regulations impacting the office of the CFO and finance teams?
So I feel that on the disclosure side, on the measurement side, the life of a CFO is definitely changing. I think that we are going to be asked to do a lot more. And I think that, at least in my view, I think that sustainability KPIs or metrics are going to take the same standards of regular financial disclosure. I mean, it's going to be exactly the same. And when I talk to our team in the company, I'm saying, guys, let's not treat this as something different. It's got to go through the same level of rigorousness, of transparency, of traceability, of auditability, of frequency of reporting, credibility, as we do with any of our financial disclosures that we make to the market. Because ultimately, it is going to be part of our financial disclosure. It is going to be part of the disclosures that we make to the market about the risks and the opportunities embedded in our business when we raise capital, whether it's debt capital or equity capital or whatever. And I think no company that needs capital is going to be able to somehow shirk that requirement. Frankly, I think that's the way it's going to be.
Workiva recently did a study where we saw that there was a disconnect between executives and teams, feeling that there was the same level of due diligence and rigor. And what you did so fabulously there, that is a key takeaway for executives and leaders tuning in, is apply the same amount of rigor. Share that with your teams. Give that direction to your teams so that they can rally behind how we approach this world that's going to have a global agreement for financial and societal impact, but some nuances along the way. I love that you mentioned risk, and I wonder if we can just take a moment to touch on risk in our time together. Tell us how CEMEX is integrating this idea of corporate risk management strategy into their ESG work. Tell us more about that.
I mean, a lot of people think of risk as risk management, interest rate risk management, or foreign exchange risk management, or commodity risk management. And the reality is that it goes beyond that, right? This is a domain of risk that is going to only develop and mature from the investor's perspective, right? And all of us are trying to get our hands around what is it, how to quantify it, how to provide data for investors to understand it very well so that they can also quantify it, model it, and try to predict it as part of the performance of any of the companies that they're investing in, right? And so we're doing precisely that ourselves. We're trying to understand what elements of sustainability, and there are many, right? Whether it's decarbonization, whether it's water, whether it's circularity, there are many aspects of sustainability. Social impact is another component. Obviously, governance is another important component. And every one of these things have very important operating risk knock-on effects on the business. And we started back in 2015 getting into very detailed kind of MD&A sections in our integrated reports. When we all take a look at our business, we're all operating in several markets where the biggest purchaser of our products and services are governments that have massive infrastructure programs, whether it's in the US or in Mexico or in Europe or wherever, the rest of Latin America. Those clients, ultimate clients, have their own stakeholders that really want, players in the capital markets to be doing something about climate, something positive about climate change. And so measuring all of those risks, quantifying those risks, not just like talking about them qualitatively, that requires a lot of documentation, a lot of technology, a lot of auditing procedures, a lot of transparency, both internally and externally. And it also means that all of our executives, like you mentioned a minute ago, they need to be just as concerned about this stuff as we are about producing cement or ready mix and delivering it to our customers. I mean, it is existential. And from my perspective as a CFO, I mean, I will say it's a challenge because we're still working things through in terms of modeling, is being able to have a quantitative ability to measure the impact and to manage the potential impact and maybe even profit from some of these knock-on effects that we're talking about, which is very important, right?
Well, and I think it's that part where it's every every business decision has a risk, an opportunity, and a cost. And when you look at your material issues and you look at the double materiality that we've talked about on this show, a practical step for teams are coming together and saying, okay, where is this material issue a risk? Where is it an opportunity? And one thing we're seeing out of practice sharing is start to even identify the emerging, right? What's coming up, but maybe you don't have enough data yet. Maybe it's just percolating among customers or regulators or those in your supply chain that you know you need to start monitoring it. And then dig in one area. I think that's a piece that you said really well. You don't have to try to figure out every single double impact right now, but start. And the SDGs are such a great way to also look at what is the impact your company is having on the world, because it is a global standard. And so even that is a great place for people to begin. You mentioned the role of innovation and technology, and this is a show that loves to talk about innovation and technology. What role do you think that plays for the future of a CFO as they think about risk management, sustainable finance, ESG, and reporting?
In our business and at CEMEX, we realized very early on that innovation plays many roles, right? One is to make sure that we're delivering the right sustainable, building materials and solutions to our customers, because their customers are being asked the same by their end users. And I think that's a trend that is only going to grow. We need to innovate in the characteristics of our products and services. We need to innovate in the type of energy that we use in our business, which is extremely important. And we have made some very important commitments in terms of clean electricity, for instance, and we're moving towards that. We've made some very important commitments in water, and we're moving fresh water extraction, and we're moving towards that. The other area of innovation, frankly, is in the area of manufacturing our products, because the biggest chunk of our emissions are in scope 1. And so we're super focused on how do we reduce scope 1 emissions. And a very important part of that effort is innovation. And we're experimenting with producing clinker, which is the intermediate product of cement, with solar, for instance. We just produced a few months ago, we produced the first amount of clinker using 100% solar energy. That is enormous. Now, is it available at scale? No, but it's the beginning. We're, experimenting with electricity. We're experimenting with some novel materials, for instance, in terms of the cementitious materials, in terms of admixtures. We're experimenting with hydrogen injection. Actually, we're using hydrogen injection, but we're looking at taking it to the next level. We're looking at what do we do with CO2 if we capture it? Looking at nanotechnologies, for instance. But I would say that the biggest heavy lift, and that is from 2030 to 2050. I think between now and 2030, most of the solutions that we're going to be using, if not all, are really tried and true solutions. The other way that we do innovation in the company, which I can't comment if it's unique or not, but we do have a company called CEMEX Ventures. And that is a company that is specifically targeting what we call ConTech, construction technologies. We're constantly on the lookout. We have a terrific team that looks at literally hundreds of financing opportunities during the course of a year. They put all of this stuff through a very thorough funnel, focusing on technologies that we believe could be successful, could be feasible, and could have synergies and applications in our industry based on our decarbonization roadmap. Or maybe some other new ideas, again, that contribute in the same direction. And that has proven to be a very interesting way of looking at digitally native R&D. Now, in addition to that, we do have our own R&D facilities that are coming up with a lot of the that are executing a lot of the industrial sized R&D and implementation of pilots and all of that. But innovation is very critical, both on the product side for customers and on the sustainability journey. Without that, I can't imagine any company being able to really be successful at the end of the day.
Well, Maher, we're coming to the end with our final question. Both of our companies, as a part of the CFO coalition, really invested in being micro-sector case studies, looking at building practical tools and resources for CFOs all over the globe. So we'll be sure to put those into the show notes. We were also a part of the Forward Faster initiative announced right out of Climate Week with the UN Global Compact, really progressing and moving companies forward as they relate to their financial and societal impact. So as we close out, here is your final question. What advice would you offer for CFOs aiming to incorporate ESG into their financial decisions to enhance value and risk management?
Ooh, tough one. Look, I think, and I probably maybe going to spend a minute or two talking about that. I think you got to start with what you're really trying to do at the end of the day. And if you're really true to your stewardship role of capital, you got to go at the end of the day with the most rigorous, transparent, and traceable way of communicating to the market about risks that potentially may be inherent in the sustainability journey, but also the opportunities that could be attained and may be inherent in that same journey. And share that and communicate that as loudly, as clearly, as consistently as possible. And really take that journey of disclosure as seriously as one can get. Because if all of us do the same, then the capital markets that we're trying to nurture and grow are going to actually do that in the quickest way possible, and all of us will benefit in that case. If some of us don't do that, and then we start diluting the effort, I think all of us will not be benefiting as much as we could. And so I would just encourage my global colleagues in the ether there, other CFOs, is to say, if we all do good, we're all going to benefit at the end of the day. And if we don't, it's going to be suboptimal for us. And the world is moving in that direction. I mean, the train has left the station. Humanity is demanding for companies and for capital to be allocated in the best way possible to improve, sustainability, conditions around the world. I know I probably went a little bit too long, but that's kind of my advice.
Well, with that, let's get moving together and continue to see the progress around the world. Thank you for such an enlightening discussion. And it was so wonderful to have you on the show and be with you again, as we all together want to see a better world and a stronger financial economy for all.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of ESG Talk, brought to you by Workiva, the world's only unified platform for financial reporting, ESG, audit, and risk. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us on Apple Podcast and subscribe to future episodes on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. We'll talk real soon.